Good afternoon, everybody. It's 1 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and start the Finance Committee meeting. This is a meeting of the City Council Finance Committee to receive a presentation on the mayor's proposed fiscal 2022 budget. There will also be an opportunity for council members to ask questions of the finance director and his staff. There will be no public comment taken today. Public comment will be taken next week at the regular city council meeting at 10:30 a.m. Today we have, in addition to myself as chairman of the Finance Committee, I know that Mr. Richardson, who's also on the Finance Committee, will be joining us soon. Mr. Williams, I don't know whether he's still with us. But other than that, we have City Councilwoman Bess Rich, City Council President Lavon Manzi, City Council Vice President C.J. Small, and City Councilwoman Gina Gregory. We also have Finance Director Mr. Holt and members of his staff. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Holt.
Okay, can you all hear me?
You press your button.
You can all hear me now?
Now we can.
Okay. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Mr. Davis. I appreciate you taking the time today to speak with us, to go over the budget. I think we have about an hour of time, and I have probably about 30 minutes to go over it, and leaving about 30 minutes for questions, if that works for you. I'll start out by talking a little bit about some of the changes in the budget this year that if you were familiar with last year's budget, you may notice them, and I want to cover those briefly before we get into the numbers. After that, we'll cover the general fund, then the capital budget, and then some detail on the convention center, which also contributes to the budget. Okay, first page. So that's just my review. Oh, I did need to mention also that there will be a little bit of reference from time to time on internal services and enterprise funds that are affected that affect the general fund as well. Okay, next page, thanks. Okay, the budget process started back in April, probably about 3 weeks after I got here. And we started by providing the budget documents to each of the different departments for them to review. We gave them each about 6 weeks in which to review the budget. Our goal was to have a level funded budget for this year, which basically means taking last year's budget and rolling it over into this year, and therefore keeping a flat budget in anticipation of some other expenses that we had coming this year. After the departments...
I'm sorry. When you say flat budget, are you talking about flat revenues?
No, just the overall budget in general.
Revenues and expenses.
Revenues and expenses, yeah. We gave them about 5 weeks. We got back together again in the early part of June, and we started reviewing the budgets. And of course, in the budget process, we always have some discussions to go on further. That process continued on until about mid-July, at which time most of the budgets were completed. Then finance took them and fine-tuned them somewhat in a few small conversations with different departments up till about the end of July, at which time we started reviewing them with the chief and with the mayor. And then we concluded that about a week and a half ago in time to present it to the council. So it was really a period of time that lasts from April up until early August. The first part of the presentation I want to talk to you about, I know that many of y'all are familiar with the structure of the budget, and there have been some changes in the department this year, in the city this year, that I'd like to share with you, so that as you go through it, you won't see some things that may come as a surprise. So I'll take each of the departments one by one and go through there. The first, the big change in the mayor's budget this year was the addition of the executive secretary and a chief of staff. In the past several years, the chief of staff was underneath the finance budget because Mr. West was handling both positions. This year, you'll see them in the mayor's budget. Also, the Office of Strategic Initiatives was developed. That had been a department or a group that had been funded by a Bloomberg initiative for about 4 years, mainly to look at efficiencies within the city. That grant expired this past year, and now they're part of the mayor's staff. We then had neighborhood development, municipal enforcement, Jamie Roberts. That department was under finance, and earlier in the year, late last year, they were moved also to the mayor's budget. The film office, that's moved to administrative services under Joe Snowden. And communications and external affairs, that was reorganized to external community affairs headed by Anitra Henderson, and we had community engagement by Candace Cookson. Going to the next page, just quickly going through the finance department. Finance department was quite a bit bigger up through the end of last year. We've since reassigned procurement and human resources to administrative services by Joe Snowden. Neighborhood development, as I mentioned, is now over in the mayor's department. IT, GIS, GulfQuest, that's also moved over to administrative services. And then Bill Mobile, their executive director, and their services now fall under Public Works. Yes, sir.
In the past, Bill Mobile had its own executive director.
Correct, and it still does. Shayla is still the executive director of Bill Mobile.
But then you have somebody, the executive director of Public Works.
Okay, maybe some clarity on the title. Senior director, maybe at one time she had the title executive director, but she does fall into the Public Works department now. She brings us something.
Zoning and planning?
There's only 3 executive directors. So you have admin services, public works director, public safety director, and then the director of finance. The others are either directors or senior directors. So Shayla, I reckon, was always senior director, not the executive director.
Okay, does that answer it? For now, okay.
That wasn't my understanding, but it is.
Okay. Then the new department, administrative services, headed up by Joe Snowden. You can see the list of different activities that fall under his area. We already referred to them earlier as we talked about movements around, but it's human resources, 311, GulfQuest, Museum of Arts, procurement, MIT, and
What page is that on?
oh, I'm sorry, page 5.
5?
Oh no, it's not that. It's on the handout. It's on the
What
handout.
about in our
It's on the
plan?
handout.
Yeah, I know.
But we're looking at the handout
Right,
in the presentation.
right, but where do you find how much is allocated for the, what page? I'll tell you. I'm just trying to keep up.
It's on page 9, page 9.
9, not 4?
Yeah, the budget itself. Well, that's the detail.
4, I'm just trying to, okay.
I think she just wants us first.
Okay, that's the
Okay.
summary, just page one summary.
No, he was talking about the civic and cultural affairs, and okay.
Page 9, I think will tell you what to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
sorry.
Mr. Holt, please continue.
Say again?
I said, please continue.
Okay. Okay. Couple of small changes to Public Works. The title of trash and solid waste was changed to sanitation, and a few minor changes in Parks and Recreation as indicated on the slide above. Aquatics moved in athletics, programming merged into community centers, and then special activities was merged into senior and therapeutics. And we already talked about external community affairs. We have an executive director of external community affairs. That's Anitra Henderson, and then that pretty much rounds out the major changes within the budget.
Hold on. Because you just, when you name the executive director, just want to that you name external.
I'm missing Nitra, and so there are 5. And what I probably need to do is get y'all the current organization.
Yeah, sure, be that.
The organization chart that's on the web is
Oh,
nowhere near what you're talking about.
yeah, we need,
According to the document that, the city should be operating with an up-to-date organization chart. So you got it all charted out, but what you got on the website is false, so y'all need to put the right stuff up there.
So, you know, that,
That would help. Be very helpful.
it would help you understand why the budget was working.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definite. Goes hand in hand, I would think. Great.
And we'll look for Mr. Morrow to be getting that updated work chart to us.
Organization.
I'll tell you, while he goes over this, let me try to go upstairs and see if we can type that for you. It might help you as you look at the, because it has reorganized significantly.
Yeah.
Okay, please continue, Mr. Henry.
Okay, then the last slide here, performance contracts. There were a few changes to performance contracts this year. We moved the Lindy Tree Bowl and the USA Cancer Institute from the capital improvement budget to performance contracts. And we moved from the convention center budget, the Events Mobile Sports Authority, the Gulf Coast Challenge, and the Senior Bowl. And there's a new one called Coastal Alabama Partnership, really dedicated to the education and city government and community government.
These all move to performance contracts?
Yeah, and they'll all be in the general fund, and they will all be on page,
Page 16?
Yeah.
Page 16.
Yeah, page 16. That's a list of all the performance contracts.
How much did we give to Senior Bowl last year? Where do we see what it got last year versus this year?
It was in the capital improvement fund budget last.
Yeah, how much did we get?
If you look at the capital budget.
It was 126. Now it's
We gave less money to the Senior Bowl last year, and we gave more this year because we were trying to keep them all equal. The Lindy Tree Bowl had more money than all of them, and so we more or less tried to bring them all in line this year.
Senior Bowl was given $225,000.
They're getting 500 this year. And they're not even in our stadium.
And Mr. Fuller.
Okay. Okay, going to the next page, we'll start off talking about the general fund. A couple of highlights in this year's general fund. Number one, we implemented a 5% raise for the city employees. That's reflected in this year's budget. There will be no increase in healthcare costs this year. It's for the third straight year. And fourth or third, this year we are not using a carryover. And when I get to the page, the next page, I'll illustrate it for you. But in the past, we've been putting carryover funds from the surplus into the budget, to balance the budget, and this year we did not do that. And then, as I mentioned, performance contracts, some of them have been moved to the general fund.
Okay, so what you gonna do with the carryover?
What?
If you're not gonna put them back in the budget, what you're gonna do with carryover?
We're not going to use them. The carryover came from the surplus, and this year, and it has never been something that we've done every year, at least at the same level. This year, we decided that we didn't need to do it, and we're not moving it.
You're just gonna let it remain in surplus?
For the time being, yes, sir.
All right.
Okay, the next page. Okay, this is really the summary, Ms. Rich, that I think you were looking at it first. And this is where a lot of the detail is. I won't go into every single line item there, but I will mention a couple of them. If you look at the revenue section above, you'll see all of the different sources of revenue, from taxes all the way down through fines, forfeitures, interest, et cetera, all the way down to a total revenue this year of $284 million. That compares to the budgeted revenue last year of 264. I guess as usual, The largest source of revenue is the sales taxes or taxes. As you can see, again, this is the case, and this year we have about 231 built into to this year's budget, mainly because we've seen such a significant rise in the amount of sales revenue tax collection over this past year, and that's pretty much been due to the stimulus packages, both from the government and for individuals. And I guess people just not going out and doing things that they did in the past, staying home and spending more things that generate sales tax. So we think that trend is going to continue, and I'll go into that in just a minute more, in a little more detail. But we think that trend will continue this year, maybe not to the same level. Any questions about the revenue or the trend? Okay. Looking at expenditure.
I have a question, Mr.
Yes.
It shows that in the current fiscal year, the budget anticipated, if I'm reading this right, drawing $21 million from the reserve.
Yes.
That's correct.
And in those prior 3 years, those are negative numbers. So those would have been funds that stayed in the reserve, that went into the reserve, right?
That's correct. That's the net income for each of those years. But when we budgeted each of those years, we budgeted about an $8 million carryover, which we did not use. So in this year, we budgeted the $20 million carryover, which we're not going to use because the year has been as good as it has been. So when we were looking at 22, we decided that we were going to live within our means and not budget a carryover because we did not see that it was not necessary.
Yeah, but we're not going to be contributing to the reserve either. We're not going to be taking from the reserve, and we're not going to be contributing to the reserve.
If all things are equal and we budget.
Right, if it comes out perfectly, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But if revenues are more and expenses are less, then we would add to the reserve. But this is the budget for 26.
Right, but we're not, my point is we're not budgeting to take it from the reserves, and we're not budgeting to put anything back into the reserves.
Well, the only thing that's budgeted is the 2% reserve
Right.
that's required by the 5.6 million.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question? On this topic, last year, I forget how much came out, but there was a bunch of capital programs that used the
13
reserve.
million.
Do you remember how much that was?
13 million, about 12, 13
13 out
million.
of the 20? Is that what it was?
Yes.
Okay, so no extra capital programs that want to be funded.
Now, I
But
believe,
but I figure whenever you come to the end of the budget year and then you wait for your audit, it appears in listening to all those monthly finance reports that you have a robust surplus.
We do.
there is a policy, and once we realize the actual numbers for 21, a resolution will be put forward that carries the amount from the general fund to the capital fund, but that will be done when we know
Later,
what our
after,
capital
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
okay. And you have to, what is it, 2.2% of your budget has to be reserved? Is that what the state law says?
2%, 2%.
2%, not 2.2, okay. Thank you. But again, you're not using that from reserve money either. You just are able to, okay, I get it. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Holt?
Yes, okay. Just maybe one other thing. On the column down there on the right at the very bottom, right before you see the total expenditures and transfers out, that's kind of where you also find dedicated assets to Civic Center, Fire and Medic, Wave, tennis, Sanger, golf, and things like that. We do have money that is supporting those institutions there. And then the other cost center, that's mainly hard cost. And you can see the detail on those, and I would encourage you to take a look at those. At some point in time, that would be page,
For the other cost centers?
yeah, for the other cost center, yeah, that would be page 14. I would encourage you all to take a look at that, and just, you'll be surprised, I think, to see it. all the different organizations that are city-run organizations that receive money from the general fund.
And what page did you say? I'm sorry.
Page 14.
Thank you. And what about the transfers out? What page is that on? Find out.
Transfers out will be on page 14
Oh,
also.
same page. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, the next page is really just a kind of a summary. As you can see on the left-hand side, taxes, 82% of our revenue, as we indicated earlier. Licenses and permits, only 14%, and then a few other miscellaneous areas for revenue. Let's see here. For the total revenues, though, I think this is an interesting chart, and spent a little time looking at it. Because
Notice that the blue is actual numbers for those years and the green is budget. So when you're comparing the two, it's important to note those differences.
Word's still out.
Right.
The word, yeah. So yeah, it's interesting to see 2018-19, really a gradual rise in revenue all the way through 2020. And then typically, the way we budget in the past is we try to use the previous year as our guide for this year's budget, which is what we did last year. So 255, 256. As of right now, though, at the pace we're running right now, we're going to be considerably higher than the 256 million and maybe closer to 300 million. So looking into next year, we put in 280. And the reason we put in 280 is because, as I said at the beginning, the revenue from this year was, I think, extraordinarily high and due to special circumstances. I think that we've had GDP in the second half of this year almost 7%. We've had $5 trillion in stimulus being passed around the country, and we've had people with nothing to do but go out and spend it, to put it bluntly. And so, our expectation is that there will be some carryover this next year. The GDP outlook for next year is 4% growth. And, that may not sound like much, but 4% is about twice as much as it typically is. And so we still have growth next year. We still have what we would consider a pretty robust year, although not to the level that we had this year. And so rather than budget 300 million or something high like that, we took a more conservative approach in budgeting 280, which is still a significantly high number compared to what we had done prior to this year. Okay, and then looking at our expenditures, you can see pretty much the breakout of those. Public Works, Public Safety is our largest, and they have the largest budget most times. Other departments, and such as finance and some of the smaller groups, and then we have other cost centers and transfers out. The transfers out are things like WAVE, Civic, fire, medics, and the other cost centers are just the pension fund, solid waste, performance contracts, and things like that. You'll find all listed out on that page that we just gave you a few minutes ago. And then actual expenditures for the coming year. Again, the budget process is pretty much the same as it is for revenue. We typically use the previous year's budget or performance to set the budget for the current year. And generally speaking, I think it's fairly close and it's the conservative way to do it. But this year, I think will be a little bit different. We have a little more growth this coming year based on last year and also based on some of the requirements that we have to support the different departments. And then the next page is the general fund balance and projection. And Ms. Rich, this is what you were asking about.
Yes.
So as of July, 134 million approximately in the fund balance with 2 months to go. And you'll look at this and you'll see what's this negative 6.8. Negative 6.8 really is our budgeted number from last year. Because we're not into those here, so we're going with last year's budget, and typically August and particularly September, especially, we usually lose money in those months. I think realistically, I think August will probably come in more like they've been coming in over the last several months. And September, maybe not, but even September may be a little bit better just because of the continuation of the sales revenue tax that we've been getting over the last, but September will most likely be a negative number. So, we put down here a projected fund balance of 127, but in all actuality, I think it could be more like 130, 132, something like that. We'll have a much better handle on it at the end of this month. Next year, we'll start out with a projected fund balance. Well, that's to be determined. So, this was kind of a calculation based on what we thought we might do using the conservative way, but we'll just have a better idea at the end of this month. So that's the review of the general fund. Any questions on that?
Let's go ahead through the rest of the presentation.
Okay, so the next page, again, this is the summary page or the detail page for the capital improvement fund. And overall, you can see that if you look on the left-hand side, you can go down the middle. It says the fiscal year 22 budget. And the total revenues for the 22 budget transfer in will be $57 million for our capital budget. The second number, or the number right below that, is $23.6 million, and you'll see right away that's debt service. So we will be spending about $23 million on debt service out of that 57, leaving us about $34 million available for allocation. And you can see if you compare that to the year before, it doesn't have that $13 million in there that we had used this year. On the right-hand side, the expenditures, you can see that for all the districts, 1 through 7, there's a $3 million proposed budget. And then we have the main municipal buildings, infrastructure studies, and other capital projects, $4 million. That's pretty much money that comes from the sales tax fund. Then going down a little bit further, if you have some questions, the economic incentives. Economic incentives, these are projects that are brought to us for investment in the city by other private companies or individuals. And usually what we do is we provide them some incentive to come. It's kind of like we did for Airbus, for many different projects, and we have others that are ongoing right now. And the expectation is we'll spend about $2.5 million this year on incentives for those economic incentive or economic development companies coming in. Going further on down, you can look at public service, and you can see a significant increase there. But if you turn the page on, just to give you the details rather than have you look for it.
Page 21.
Page 21, that gives you the detail of how that money is going to be spent. So all in all, this year, the total expenditures for the capital budget will be about $34.5 million, which is down by about $12 million from last year because we did not make that capital infusion of $13 million that we did last year.
That did 14.1.
I beg your pardon?
Okay, I thought, the math added 14.1.
14.1.
13,195,000.
Yeah, I'm sorry. If I did say that, I misstated. It's 13. There's 13 million that we brought in. And you can see that, I think somewhere, in last year's budget, over on the adopted budget in 2021, you can see from the general fund, $13.1 million.
That was out of surplus.
Yes.
Last
Yeah.
time, not the general fund.
Well, it's the general fund, sorry.
Yeah.
General fund,
Hey, Paul,
Yes.
on the economic development funds, did we spend all of our economic development dollars this year, or does it just continue rolling? Or
Each project is different. For example, we've got a new Airbus project. It's called the Series C Aircraft Limited Partnership with Airbus. It's a pretty big project on that one. We have an incentive that's unique to them. We have others that are small, such as the Mitchell Cancer Center, that may only last a couple of years, but they're all pretty much dedicated to encouraging businesses to come into the city.
I just meant the account itself.
It does roll.
Oh, yeah, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, it does.
So is there more in our account now than 2.5 million total, just waiting?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, it is.
Is that shown anywhere, like a total amount that's in?
It's a capital project and those funds are within that capital project. It has a larger balance, but we have commitments for future years, so it really kind of balances itself.
Yeah, so it's just within the budget somewhere as a capital for economic development.
You'll only see it each year when you appropriate the funds. Otherwise, it's in the capital improvement budget, and you have to look on the system.
Just curious to see what it was total, because I know we put 2.5 in every year, just didn't know.
Yeah, we've been doing it for the last 4 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like Chief Mark was saying, South Alabama Logistics Park is a good example. Even though it's a $3 million commitment, only $1 million is allocated per year.
Yeah, but I think what she's asking for, what is the current balance in that fund?
Unreserved.
Unreserved
The current
balance.
balance is approximately $4 million.
And how much of that is committed?
You have about,
We just need to.
you have closer to about $6.5 to $7 million, but it's committed over future years.
But we're putting another 2.5 in this
Yes,
year, so that,
every year we usually put approximately $2.5 million.
But so there should be a sheet that says, this is how much is in it, this is how much already is earmarked. And so if we could get that and then just see what's still open, and then we'll know to add the 2.5 for this year. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and then the next page, just sort of some highlights of the capital improvement fund. One of the things that we did this year was we had on our revenues, we increased the sales tax line by 5.9 million, and we basically did that by removing another line item. We used to have 2 line items for sales tax. One was called sales tax discount, which was more or less a obsolete designation. And so this year we just took that line out and took an equivalent amount of money and added it to the sales tax line. So there's really no change in the amount of money, although there is a little additional money in the sales tax revenue than there was last year, using both figures. So if you look at the detail sheet, do you want to look at the detail sheet again?
Yeah, what?
So now I know I've raised some questions there with you. You'll look at the top line on the left, you'll see the adopted budget of 2021.
What page are you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
18. Thank you.
Did you give it 14? Yeah. 14. Okay, and if you look at the column adopted budget on the left-hand side, you'll see sales tax at 36 million. Page, no, I'm sorry, 14 of the presentation.
It's 18 if you're looking at the budget.
Thank you. I'd rather look at the
Page
budget.
18.
That's where all my notes are.
18 of the
Page
budget.
18 in the budget.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So if you look at the top line there, with which you'll see that last year, the sales tax revenue for the budget was 36 million. And if you go down 4 lines, you'll see that there was a line that says sales tax discount and sales tax 4.1. That was an obsolete designation. So this year we decided to take that amount of money plus the balance that was due to the sales tax fund and just all put it in one line. So we're at $42 million this year. Okay, so that one, and then overall, let's see, transfers in, we already talked about that, they decreased by 13.1 million. And then, but transfers from the convention center increased by 1.3, and we'll talk about the convention center in just a second, but that's an additional sort of revenue source of revenue for the capital budget this year. And then finally, expenditures, once again, decreased because of the 13 million. Public service and safety increased by 1.5, and the details attached in the budget sheet, and that will be on page, if you're looking at that presentation, that will be on page
21.
21. That will be on page 21, and that'll show you how the money increased from 1.9 to 3.4.
Hey, Bob, on the Munis Untitled software, is that the 311 updates?
No, ma'am. No, the police software is independent from the 311. It's a new software replacing some software that we had with Tyler that we were having difficulty with. You want to describe what it does?
So this is basically part of our records management system in the police department. The software is called Hexagon. So Scott Kearney's been working with them on trying to develop a better software package that will handle the volume of records for a municipality our size. Tyler really wasn't sufficient for what we did.
Right, well, we were talking this morning about updating, I think, the 311 system. Is that in this budget, a software update, or?
It would be an MIT, but it's very small amounts. It's, they're using some of the current software, just get more licenses, and then we'll try to build out the 311.
So it's just, okay, it's just built in.
I mean, some of it's pretty easy to do. As Councilman Davis issued to give the SRO number at the end of it, but to be able to get that, all of you access to a system where you see the status is where we eventually want to be. Or citizen.
Okay. Well, are we looking at, maybe somebody else other than Tyler? I understand Tyler's not. Okay.
No, the Tyler is not supplying that new software. That's Hexagon.
Yeah, but we increasing, it's a, unit Tyler software system, we increasing by 1 million. So probably will carry over.
That's a carryover from last year where we got a deferred payment obligation, and it's a continuation of an annual payment that we have to make to Tyler this year.
There's nothing more, it's just an annual payment.
Nothing more.
All right, I'm not forgetting that.
Okay, staying in line with the presentation, capital expenditures, looking at the pie chart. This is just a summary. You won't see this. Oh, you have it there. Okay. You can see how it's broken down. I think the one thing to really notice and contemplate if you're thinking about how much the city pays for different things, the debt service, 23 million, that's a pretty sizable fund. And that's all part of our goal to reduce long-term debt. And we have about, how many more years would you say?
2029.
2029 to get that paid down fully. And then the rest is just summary of what you'll find on the detailed budget, unless you have any questions. We talked about the economic development. Okay, and then the last page on the presentation is the Convention Center Fund. You can see there that, let's see, which give me a page for that one.
This is pretty well spelled out.
Okay. Yeah, okay, so you can see that total revenues into the fund are about $12.2 million. Most of that came from sales tax and the lesser to room tax. We have a $600,000 carryover that is in this year's budget. And you can see how that money is distributed. About 7.63 goes into the capital fund, and 1.3 is used for convention operations, and then about 2.6 for Mobile Bay Convention and Visitors Bureau. So that's how that money is dispersed.
I wish people understood that the convention center is actually positive. You know, they really don't understand that. They really need to digest this information based on what sales tax come in.
Yeah. This is a, well, you want to address this one since we No.
I
Okay.
mean, they don't understand. I don't mean that in like condescending way.
Questions, yeah. But yeah, you're right.
I mean, it more than pays down the bond and its operations. It does all these other things.
It's a good question, and I'll be honest with you, it was raised as we prepared this, and I think as the year progresses, we may look at maybe handling this a little bit differently in
I
the
think
future.
for the community to understand, it would be really, because we isolated a tax. And on take it, that's the tax you're calculating. Or am I correct about that?
The 10.1 million, I think, is just an obligation that was written into the convention center when it first was built, and it was continued on to this day.
Well, it was the extra penny in restaurants and hotels. And yeah, the hamburger, well, restaurants.
Hamburger, yeah.
Yeah.
But, it's a good question, and we're
It
going to
should
look at it
be
this year.
pure, and then you could say, well, this is surplus and we're putting it. I think it would be better for the community to know. I mean,
It does go back into the capital improvements fund budget.
Yeah.
Okay, and then just a couple of, highlights. I already mentioned that we had a carryover of 600,000. We transferred from room tax, the tax board increased by 1.3 million from last year. And we moved a couple of bowl games and other events from the convention center fund over to the general fund. So that's kind of a summary of the budget this year. I know it's a lot of numbers in there, and a lot of different accounts in there. And
Thank you, Mr. Holt. Appreciate that.
open any questions that you have.
We'll start with Mr. Richardson. Mr. Richardson, do you have any questions? No. President Nancy?
Yes, I have some questions, but I'll be disseminated directly to the board.
Okay.
Thank you. Vice President Small?
Yes, just two. Chief, when do you think we probably get that organization chart? Will it be today or sometime this week?
I went up to actually make an edit, and it has to do with NEFRA, but I told them to go, if they can't make that edit quickly, just understand that we are making that edit because of NEFRA's passing. So it should be coming down.
And the second thing is, it has to do with the budget, but not particularly just with this one, but I think it will be the CIP meeting soon, Mr. President, and really discuss the funding of the CIP.
I will totally concur with Mr. Vice President.
That's all for right now.
Ms. Rich?
Thank you. I do have some questions. I'll also get it in writing because I don't know if you can do this. Obviously, I don't think you can, but could I have a list of employees that function as contractual and their salaries and what department they're in? Yeah, under contract to the city. In other words, they're not married, it's not.
Yes, you're asking us for the appointed, not contracted employees, but
Well, I guess the appointed and contractual would be good, like, yeah. Do you have any? I don't know. I mean, I would
Yeah,
like to get that.
we have both.
Okay, yeah, split it
I
up.
think she's asking for all the non-married employees.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, and also, I would assume that would take in any, legal firms that work for the city of Mobile or will be budgeted.
Yeah, those are
But
not
where is that budget?
the legal budget.
Yes, I mean, I see legal, but
You
one
broke
time
down.
I asked and it was more the city legal people and courts. And I can't seem to find, how much is budgeted for outside legal counsel.
Okay.
That would be great. And I would also concur that on our capital program, if we could get the, fund, how it's going to be split out, the different, we work with Jasmine Washington, but, what's going to actually be in the budget, what that's going to look like, if we could get that prior to our vote.
You mean the projects?
Yeah,
Projects?
yeah, or the amounts allocated, like for traffic engineering, and, that would be great. On the police total, there was an increase of 5 million. Is that strictly the 5% or?
No, if y'all remember, we ended up, going to body cams for all school. That was about $2 million that was not budgeted in 2021. And also you have the extra cost of the first precinct or precinct 1 opening down on Dolphin Island Parkway. That also had to be budgeted. I would say that some of it's also contract employees that were grant employees that are now coming back on the payroll. And some of those grants, they only cover so many years before they, and then the rest would be the cost of living adjustment.
Okay. Because that was, a significant increase and I just couldn't figure out what you had in there. And.
Another point on the police department, we went to 3 academy classes a year too, instead of 2 academy classes, and that's to deal with the increasing attrition rate.
And on fire, you went up 700K. What is that in? Is that strictly salary, so everything's kind of even there?
That's correct.
Okay. Let me see what else. And administrative services went up 400,000.
That's going to have to do more with the reorganization and a lot of what Mr. Holt was going over with you. And that's why I think that when you get the org charts, they may make more sense to you. But we moved a lot of stuff out of finance that Paul was, he was kind of wearing 2 hats. And so we had a lot of reporting to him. When we reorganized, we put mainly just revenue, accounting, and finance all in one bucket. And then we took like HR.
All right, so we'll get that and be able to plug it back in.
Should walk in the door in a minute.
And keep in mind too, as we said at the very beginning, there was a 5% increase.
Right, I
5%
figured
increase.
that out, and I
Yeah.
tried to do that in my head from the year before, but I couldn't figure out where all those other expenses were coming from. Okay, that getting the chart would be really, really good. And in the mayor's office, there's an increase of 1.5 million. So you went from 2018 at 5.7 up to 9.2 for this year. So that's strictly putting in chief of staff and secretary.
I wish it was just the cheapest.
That's all I'm hearing, so I need some more definition.
Yeah, and again, a lot of that is in the presentation under the mayor's bucket. We identified, it was a lot to do with reorganization. So that's why I'm waiting on that chart to come in.
Okay, all
But,
right.
we did move some things to legal, which is like our EDD program with Arshanique under Jacob Roberts, that whole program was moved under there. Our safety officer and that budget was moved under the mayor's office for more direct control of claims. There was a lot of big concern about how claims are headed. And so, can you pass this?
Is that a new chart? That will help.
And there's also the Office of Strategic Initiatives that had been funded by a grant, Bloomberg grant
That
for the
was
last 4
Bloomberg.
years. That was moved into.
Okay, so that's under the mayor's office. Okay, and then on, I noticed on Forestry, it was down 400.
And we'll find out why. But these budgets come from the departments themselves, so I'll find out.
Okay, that would be great.
And it probably is they rearranged something, but I'll.
Okay, that would be great, because that was significant. And fleet management was down 600K. I'm rounding stuff off,
That's fine, I'll find out too.
okay? That'd be great. Same with storm drain streets. So something went somewhere, and I see blanks, but doesn't help.
If it's
my mind.
blanks, then in a previous year, that cost center was merged into another cost center.
Okay. I don't, well, yeah, I see blanks for this year, but not in past. In other words, it
Which page are you on?
on page 11 for storm drain street that are from, it went up actually this year to 900, so maybe some of forestry, I don't know. Anything you can give me, that would be great.
I'll get it.
And on Parks and Recreation, their total went down 200K, but we keep hearing about more initiatives and more programs, so if somebody could help me with that, that would be great. And also,
But just keep in mind that these budgets, they come from Shonda's.
okay, and could I get a breakdown for, I guess it's senior therapeutics total, how much is going to the Connie Hudson Senior Center? I feel like a mother hen with that one. I'd like to know, I see it's gone up, but I don't know how much is allocated for that particular facility. I'd like to know. Might have a few more, but the other cost centers went up 2 million. And I'm not sure I understand what all those, what your reasoning was in that.
Performance contracts went up 2 million because of the move from.
Oh, yeah.
The money didn't come with the performance contract, just because.
Right.
We moved all the performance contracts into the general fund budget, took it out of capital convention, so.
1.8 million.
Okay, all right. See, I'm just rounding stuff off.
That's fine.
Bear with me. And same with, I see the transfers, you just described that to me. Okay. All right, I think that pretty much hits. I might have a few more, but since I'm not the only council person, I'll get it when I get stuff back, if I see I still, that would be great. I appreciate it. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Gregory. Ms. Gregory.
The only other thing that I'd just like an update on, and it may not necessarily be part of the budget, but it kind of is. We've been working for some time to hire more project managers, engineers, public works folks in order to get all of our projects out the door. So if it's possible for us to just get an update to see where we are on some of these things, because as you know, we keep pumping money into, the CIP and other projects, yet we're still having trouble getting these projects and services performed. So I think it's time for maybe an update just to see where we are and how much we progressed.
We'll be glad to get you an update. There's actually multiple issues going on with us. It's not only just our capacity, but it's the capacity of the actual contractors to take on any more work.
Yeah, I think just an update on just everything. It may, during our CIP meetings, when we do updates on CIP, that might be a good time to, just to look at all that. And probably also the cost increases, because as we know, lumber and some of these other building materials have increased significantly, and how that plays a part in, what we're trying to do.
We can give the engineers a try to guesstimate. I mean, that's going to be an issue. We all know that, but it also has a positive impact that Mr. Holt went over with you, that if you pay twice as much for a 2x4, you're actually paying twice the sales tax to the city.
And then we turn around and pay it back out to
That would be the project. Yeah.
Now,
Did you come up with some questions, Mr. Richardson?
yes, I see at the bottom right, it says that this organization chart was adopted and it's signed by the mayor on April 12th, 2021. It was not adopted. It has not been adopted. Only the council can adopt the organization chart. Now, he may have approved what they put on here. Only the council can adopt the organization chart.
If it's
According to the law, that.
there's no reference to the organizational chart, but we put approved if you have an issue with the word adopted, but.
I'm saying now, you can't, that's an overreach. You can't adopt what you can't adopt.
Okay, no, we're here to talk about the budget.
But it's tied to the state.
It's,
We're ready to adopt it. We're saying that this is not.
Any other questions, Mr. Richardson?
No,
Okay. Ms. Rich?
and that was no question either.
No, but I appreciate getting this because it helps define what you're doing. It is nice if the council would be in the loop.
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Holden today? If not, the committee meeting is over, and Mr. President, turn it back to you I believe we're ready to reconvene the council meeting. Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Davis, our next meeting, we have a date for the next meeting, is it 1 week from now?
We'll have the public
You
hearing.
guys can put this shit on.
Today, so you can-
It is something that, because it's public. We're like the public. So if we don't.
Now, somebody, are we ready?
Yes, we're waiting until.
I snuck in.
Sam.
We always have sent to us and adopted as we. It's like, including the public. It's not that. Right, but it makes it really hard for council people when they don't know who's on.
Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'd ask that you get your attention as we would prepare. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask that you have your attention again as we will reconvene our earlier meeting. And as we will reconvene, we will again turn it over to Mr. Toby Ding Bong. Pardon me. That's not intentional. Ding Bong. And,
It's not the worst I've ever been called.
well, people slaughter my last name, so I don't do that intentionally.
Sure.
And also our city clerk. Thank you.
Mr. President, at this time, we're going to, now read the provisional, ballots, the provisional votes. And we have 4 ballots that would not read through the machine, so those have to be hand counted. And then will be hand added in as you see their stamps. So,
Read this first.
yeah.
In your box right here. It's up there now, provisional, then we just have to add these 4.
Okay, so from there, we
Which
have,
precinct?
oh, I'm sorry, that's down to. No, it's not.
Oh, it's provisional.
It's provisional.
All right, sorry.
Okay, for mayor, we're adding 1 vote for Carlos Finley.
You want to see what I'm doing versus that. Do it this way. So 1 vote for Carlos Finley.
Yes, and 1 vote for Lavon Manzi.
Which one is it?
Lavon Manzi,
In the,
District 2.
Pardon me?
you got to vote.
Got an extra vote.
Oh, I'm all for it.
There. Okay,
He
that
likes
was
that.
one.
We have 1 vote for Sandy Simpson. And in District 5, we have 1 vote for Joel Days.
What do I mean?
You ain't getting provisional balance.
Yes.
Two more out. These are damaged ballots.
Oh, okay, so again, we're repeating it. One vote for Sandy Stimpson. And in District 5, one vote for Joel Daves. We have one vote for Carlos Finley.
Okay.
And in District 7, one vote for Alan Barnes. We have one vote for Fred Richardson.
Time.
Okay.
And in District 7, one vote for Alan Barnes.
Okay. Second picture report. That's the final count on the screen.
Okay, in accordance with the results, the declared winners are in the mayor's race for Sandy Stimpson.
And then you can scroll on the side. How about this?
District 3, CJ Small. District 5, Joel Daves. District 7, Gina Gregory. Oh, District 4, I'm sorry, I skipped that. District 4, Ben Reynolds. In districts 1, we'll have a runoff with in District 1, we'll have a runoff with Corey Penn and Herman Thomas. District 2, we'll have a runoff with Levon Manzi and William Carroll. District 6, there will be a runoff with Scott Jones and Josh Woods. So now we have to go back to resolution 27722, declare the results of the August 24th municipal election.
So moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
You've already done announcements.
Announcements, any additional announcements at this moment? From the administration, from members of council?
Nope.
There will be a runoff election on October the 5th,
Yes, ma'am.
and that will be the end. We need no more elections for 4 years.
That's right. There's been a motion to adjourn, is there a second?
Second.
Probably move to second, any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Congratulations, Councilman-elect.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations in order. Right there.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's updated. It's probably got the next change on it. I shot you about this. It's a stupid fight.